The truth is that intelligence is not the gift we often believe it to be. It is sometimes a quiet fracture spreading through the mind, waiting for the moment to reveal the shadows we are never prepared for. The story begins from that very fracture, where the light of understanding does not shine on what we wish to see, but on the corners we have spent our whole lives avoiding. When you realize you see the world too clearly, too deeply, too honestly in its fragile nature. Have you ever wondered whether that clarity brings happiness, or if it is simply a heavy heart dressed in knowledge? In those moments, the world is no longer as bright as the promise youth once believed, but becomes a mirror reflecting everything you wish to forget. Intelligence in that sense is not a door opening to opportunity, but a thin curtain revealing truths you can no longer ignore. And when the curtain falls, you stand there in the dark room, facing not the shadows of the world, but the ones within yourself. Imagine an evening without wind. The breeze does not move the trees, it does not brush across the water. Everything stands still, as if the space around you is waiting for you to exhale slowly just once. In this quiet, some people feel peace, but the intelligent hear another whisper, the voice of a question without an answer, the sound of awareness pressing against every movement, the breath of unease slipping through the doorframe. Their mind makes them see the layers of meaning hidden under every small action, like a smile that is not entirely carefree, or the silence of a room that is not only still but empty. And in this ability to read what others overlook, a loneliness soft yet sharp begins to form. This loneliness does not come from a lack of friends or a lack of love. It comes from the inability to turn off the constant analysis of the mind. Intelligent people sense the subtle movements of life and the fleeting nature of them all. They hear the ticking clock not only counting seconds, but taking away pieces of time that can never return. They look at the face of someone they love not only in the present moment, but through the fear of losing them one day. Everything has two sides, and their eyes refuse to see only one. There are moments when they wish they were not so aware, not looking so deep, not understanding so much. But the mind does not work according to desire. It is a light switched on in a dusty room. The brighter the light, the clearer the dust, and the one holding the lamp cannot pretend not to see it. The truth, once seen, can never be completely erased. It clings to the mind like a thin mist that cannot be wiped away, only waited out, if it ever chooses to fade. This is why Schopenhauer is both respected and feared, not because his philosophy is difficult, but because he dared to say what others only feel in silence. He looked into the depths of life and did not see a harmonious symphony, but an endless current of desire, collision, disappointment, and the quiet ache people hide beneath their smiles. To him, the sharper the mind, the easier the heart wears down. And when he said that, he was not trying to be pessimistic. He was simply more honest than society prefers. If you have ever felt this moment, when a single small thought is enough to fill your heart with contradiction, you will understand what he meant. It is the moment you realize you can never return to the calm you once had, because your mind has opened one more door that cannot be closed. Intelligence does that. It opens, always opens, even when all you want is to live an ordinary life. From there, the anxiety of the intelligent does not come from mistakes, but from seeing too far ahead, into things that have not even happened. An average person may worry about tomorrow, but the intelligent worry about the possibilities of the distant future. Their mind is like a room with many windows, each one letting in wind. Not every gust is strong, but none are ever shut out completely. Even the softest breeze can unsettle them. While many people can enjoy simple joys like a good meal or a walk through the streets, the intelligent feel the fragility of these moments. Joy arrives, but they know it will leave. The afternoon sun shining on the table is beautiful enough to stir the heart, yet it makes them a little sad. Because beauty often signals its own fading. Their mind makes them feel so deeply that even beauty carries pain, and pain carries a trace of beauty. Everything weaves together into a web of emotions not everyone can endure. This is why someone once said that great intelligence is like living in a house made of glass. You see everything, but everything also passes through you. There is nowhere to hide completely. Thoughts slide across the mind like shadows, light yet leaving long trails, and the one living in that house always walks gently, afraid that even the smallest sound will echo twice as loud. What matters here is not to justify the sadness of the intelligent, but to recognize that this sensitivity is part of the structure of their spirit. When you see too many layers of a problem, your mind cannot react simply like others. You cannot pretend to be lighthearted about things you understand too deeply. From this point, the story asks a quiet but weighty question: whether intelligence is leading us to the dawn of awareness, or to a gray space where the light is strong enough to make us see but not strong enough to let us rest. There is no absolute answer, but the question opens a path for the listener to reflect, to look within, and see whether intelligence is a bridge toward truth or a road into a place where the mind finds no easy turn. The story begins here, from the moment we understand that intelligence is not only the ability to comprehend, but also the ability to endure. And the deeper a person understands, the heavier that weight becomes, like a crack on the surface of a clear glass cup. Beautiful and delicate, yet one gentle touch makes it tremble. This is the journey into that fracture, to understand that what lies within is not only knowledge, but the cost of being awake. And as we move deeper into that fracture, we cannot help but look back at the one who dared to touch it first, with a boldness so sharp it felt almost cold: Schopenhauer. His life was not the polished portrait of a scholar living under the soft glow of books, but a long mist-covered corridor where each step echoed against the shadows of his time. He was born into a chaotic world where uncertainty slipped into every breath, where prosperity was only a thin curtain hiding a quiet fragility underneath. From very early on, he observed the clash between desire and disappointment, between the longing for happiness and the truth that happiness always runs one step ahead of us. From that moment, his intelligence began to form not as a rescuing beam of light, but as a blade cutting through layers of fog, revealing not a bright sky, but the fragile structure of life itself. Intelligence, to him, was not a tool to search for a brighter future, but a lamp shining on the present so we could see the cracks that are always there, silent but persistent. And once that lamp is lit, a person must live with its harsh clarity, with no place left to pretend to be at peace. In his writing, we can sense a weariness that never becomes surrender, as if he had grasped the code that governs the world while knowing no one could ever rewrite it, no matter how hard they tried. After the waves of turmoil that swept across Europe during his lifetime, he understood that people do not chase happiness. They chase the illusion of happiness. And it is that illusion that grows every disappointment. Intelligence lets us see through that illusion, and because of that, the joys that were already fragile become even more faint. In his view, the less knowledgeable have an advantage the intelligent may never possess: a natural harmony with the rhythm of life. They want what they want, they believe what they believe, and when they are sad, they feel it fully without analysis or searching for causes. Their sadness is like a brief summer rain, coming quickly and fading quickly. But for the intelligent, sadness feels like the long rains of late autumn, slow and persistent, seeping into every fracture of the soul. They are not only sad because of what is happening, but because they understand why it happens, what it leads to, and how similar tragedies will repeat in the future. Intelligence becomes a mirror that reflects not only the present, but reflections of reflections, creating countless layers of meaning that keep the mind in a constant state of high activity. An ordinary person may look at a blooming flower and see only the bloom, but the intelligent see the fragility of existence, the passing of time, the presence of death somewhere in the cycle of nature. They are not pessimistic. They simply see more than is needed to keep the heart calm. And the paradox is that this deeper vision distances them from the world, not because they want to pull away, but because they cannot fully join in the simple beliefs others hold. When people celebrate something new, they see the signs of its future fading. When people compete for victory, they see the emptiness of titles that will soon be replaced. When people desire, they see the endless chain of new desires waiting after the first is fulfilled. And so, even standing in the middle of a crowd, they feel as if they are standing outside a glass window, watching life happen without being able to truly step in. In this solitude, intelligence becomes a companion that is both intimate and distant. It helps them see more clearly, understand more deeply, yet pushes them into emotional territories others never enter. There are long nights when their mind will not be silent, constantly questioning, constantly analyzing until everything feels exhausting, like a song repeating only its highest notes. And the frightening part is that they cannot simply turn it off, because that sound is the voice of their own mind, the very thing that makes them who they are. And from within that solitude, another movement begins to form, the awareness that intelligence does not protect us from suffering. It reveals suffering, and once revealed, it forces us to face life without shelter. An ordinary person can cling to belief, to hope, to dreams, but the intelligent see the fractures within those hopes themselves. They cannot comfort themselves with what they know is incomplete. Truth, once illuminated, no longer feels familiar or gentle. From this, Schopenhauer's view becomes like cold water poured over the listener's awareness. Intelligence does not make us stronger. It makes us more penetrative. And the more deeply we see, the more we discover a simple yet merciless truth, that life moves according to desires that never end. Seeing this does not free us. It only makes us aware of its repetition. And this is why the intelligent often feel life as a spiral, one they are forced to stand at the center of, watching every rotation while their heart cannot rest. But within that bare recognition, there is something like the seed of truth beginning to open. Just as your eyes adjust after staring at a dark painting long enough, and the shapes beneath the darkness slowly appear, Schopenhauer saw those shapes, and from that vision, the story leads us deeper into the loneliness that intelligence brings, as well as the small but precious opportunity hidden inside that loneliness. This is the moment the journey expands toward another dimension of understanding, the recognition of the fundamental mismatch between intelligence and the illusions people depend on to live. And from here, the story begins to shift into a darker region, where intelligence is no longer a pure light but a mirror reflecting both the world and the bottomless depths within each of us. From a mirror reflecting the outside world, intelligence begins to turn its sharp edge inward, as if the light no longer shines outward but folds back and spirals deep inside. In this space, the boundary between understanding and solitude becomes so thin that even a slightly heavier breath can cause it to crack. Intelligent people often enter this stage without realizing it, sensing only a vague feeling of suspension. They no longer fully believe in the things that make others happy, yet they have not found a place where their own mind can rest. A kind of emptiness forms, peaceful yet unsettling, as if they are standing in a wide room without knowing where the exit is. In that emptiness, every movement of life becomes both familiar and distant. They still go to work, talk, laugh, yet inside, a quiet layer of observation is always present, making every word or action pass through a filter of analysis. To others, this may look like simple thinking, but to the intelligent, it is heightened sensitivity, the feeling of never fully blending in, always having a part of the mind standing behind them, watching, recording, interpreting. This creates a subtle but persistent misalignment, making them both in life and outside of it, looking in through a pane of glass. And then, in those unusually quiet nights, when every sound from the street drifts away, they begin to feel that separation clearly. It is not the loneliness of lacking affection, but the loneliness of seeing too clearly, understanding too deeply, to the point that the world around them becomes a performance they cannot fully join. People speak of joy, yet they sense the fragile structure beneath that joy. People speak of future plans, yet they see the potential collapses hidden under each hope. They do not want to disrupt the peace of others. They simply cannot pretend to believe in what their mind has already seen through. The more they understand, the more they recognize a quiet truth. Most people need illusions to live, belief in what is good ahead, in progress, in fairness, in the idea that everything will turn out fine. These illusions are not lies. They are like soft pillows placed under each person so they can sleep well. But the intelligent are like those who cannot sleep deeply. They sense the smallest movements in the dark. They hear echoes of things that have not happened. And because of this, they rarely experience the peacefulness others enjoy so naturally. From here, a form of mental fatigue appears. It is the exhaustion of living with two layers of awareness, the layer of action and the layer of analysis. A casual sentence from someone can trigger multiple streams of thought. Why did they say that? What fear drove it? What empty space within them shaped it? A simple decision carries so many possible outcomes that they cannot rest. Others simply live, but they live and observe themselves living, and that is an invisible burden with no name. There are moments when they ask themselves whether the reason they feel out of place is not because their mind carries too much light, but because it has burned away the curtains people need to shield their hopes. Clarity makes them less protected. They do not allow themselves to believe in what is easy. And when nothing is easy anymore, life becomes a quietly exhausting journey, even while everything appears normal on the surface. In this feeling, intelligence reveals a subtle dark side. It makes the one who holds it always feel something missing, not because they are more ambitious, but because they sense the distance between what the world promises and what it truly offers. They know there is an inherent imbalance between desire and reality, between words and essence, between the sky people imagine and the ground they must walk. This imbalance makes them feel they do not belong, like someone standing before an endless sea with no shore to move toward. Yet in that sense of displacement, another side of intelligence also appears, the ability to see the value in moments others overlook. When they sit alone in a dark room, they notice the quiet beauty of the shadow on the wall. When they walk through an empty street, they hear the soft breathing of the night. When someone speaks with sincerity, they feel its depth so clearly that it leaves them silent for a long time. Their sensitivity causes pain, but it also lets them feel the delicate things life often hides from hurried minds. At that crossing point, between pain and beauty, between clarity and exhaustion, a quiet question forms. Does the path of the intelligent have to be lonely, or is it simply that they have not found someone who shares their rhythm of thought? This question feels like a soft sigh, a small but honest wish, the wish to be understood, to walk with someone, to know they are not alone in seeing the undercurrents of life. If in this moment you feel that somewhere in these lines you recognize a part of your own experience, you can leave a message below, not to prove anything, but so that people like you, those who carry many layers of thought, can recognize one another in this space. And if you wish to continue on this journey into these layers of the mind, staying with the channel will keep the story unfolding so we do not walk through these quiet regions alone. Because even though intelligence can feel like a vast dark space where every thought echoes back in ways hard to name, it can also become the place where the most beautiful encounters happen, the meeting of souls who can feel, who can think, and who can look at the world as a map of layers not everyone dares to explore. And from that fragile threshold, the story opens into a new movement. Intelligence does not only make us see the world differently, it makes us see ourselves differently. It pushes us into a land where the questions are no longer about the world, but about the solitude of awareness. And from this point, the journey into the nature of intelligence begins to turn toward another current, the current of quiet isolations and the gentle pathways that art and stillness will open ahead. From that quiet solitude, the story opens another door, where the fatigue of the mind no longer turns only inward but finds a fragile escape, like the last streak of daylight slipping through the curtain. Schopenhauer once viewed art as the only gentle breeze that could soften the weight of awareness, and it is hard to deny that in moments when life slips out of control, it is art that offers the silence reason cannot create. Not an empty silence, but one that allows the mind to stop chasing meaning, stop examining every movement, and simply exist. When an intelligent person is lost in the labyrinth of thought, art feels like a room without windows, where the light comes from within rather than from the world outside. A melody, even just a few simple notes, can pull them out of the whirlpool of questions and lift them into a space suspended between emotion and awareness. In that moment, they no longer analyze why the music is beautiful, no longer dissect the structure of sound. They simply listen, letting the music slip into the crevices of the mind, softening the parts they thought had become sharp and cold. It is as if intelligence, when meeting art, suddenly loosens its grip, allowing the heart to take over without interference. Sometimes the rescue arrives through an image, a faded painting in a quiet cafe, the faint gray of the sky before rain, or the golden outline of a dry leaf touched by the last light of the day. To most people, these are fleeting moments, but to a sensitive mind, each detail opens a new breath. They look at the painting without feeling obligated to understand it. They only need to rest inside the feeling it creates. And sometimes that feeling, a moment needing no explanation, becomes the tenderness they have been searching for all their life. Ma foi. In these moments, intelligence stops isolating them and becomes a doorway into depth. Understanding no longer wears them down, but becomes the ground for appreciation. A subtle shift occurs. Intelligence moves from strict observer to a quiet companion, respecting emotion instead of imposing analysis upon it. Because of this, they can step away from the weight of awareness, like a long-distance traveler finally finding a shaded patch of forest to lean against, listening to the rustling leaves instead of continuing forward. And is that not true? The most beautiful moments often do not come from understanding, but from feeling. A piece of music brings us to tears not because we analyze each note, but because it touches a place too deep for the mind to reach. A film scene leaves us silent not because we decode its artistic intention, but because it awakens something in memory, something we forgot but the body still remembers. Intelligence in these moments is no longer a burden, but a net helping us hold on to delicate echoes others may lose. What makes art a true escape is not only emotion, it lies in its ability to temporarily suspend the will. That instinctive drive, Schopenhauer believed, constantly pushes people toward desire and disappointment. In the presence of art, we step out of that chase. We stop being the one who pursues and become the one who simply stands still, no longer trying to gain anything, no longer fearing loss, no longer proving anything. We touch a pure form of being, free from goals and ambition. Intelligence in that moment is released from the duty of examination, and the person is freed from the inner demand to become something more than themselves. Sometimes, on a late afternoon, when sunlight slips through the window and lies on the floor like a soft yellow carpet, an intelligent heart may feel itself gently soften, not because it has found the answer, but because it has paused the search. Laughter of students echoing from a nearby porch, the warm strum of a guitar through a thin wall, or the faint scent of fresh coffee drifting by. All these small things suddenly feel enough. No need to understand, no need to hold on, only to feel them fully, as if life has returned to being simple and kind for a moment. And when art pulls them out of tangled thoughts, they begin to see that intelligence is not a life sentence. It can exhaust them, but it can also be the place where they savor depths others may never reach. Intelligence, when it learns to listen, becomes a guide leading them out of their own darkness, showing that within the deeper layers of pain, there are still clear streams that art gently sets before them. Through this blend of understanding and feeling, a delicate form of connection appears. They realize they are not entirely left behind. They see that in the strings of a guitar, in a brushstroke, in a line of poetry. Someone somewhere, in another era or another land, is sending them a heartbeat much like their own. And in that shared beat, they stop being a lone wanderer in the desert of the mind and become a traveler finding traces of souls who walk the dark roads before them. From here, the journey begins to shift direction. If art is a resting place, then inner stillness will become the more enduring home. And as emotional refuge opens the path, the story moves toward the land where one must face a quiet question. How can intelligence stop dominating the mind and become a tool that serves peace? Passing through that doorway, we enter the deepest valley of awareness, the search for a stillness so profound that even intelligence must bow before it. When art softens the sharp edges of the mind, another space begins to open, so thin and clear you can almost hear the quiet movement of your own thoughts. This is when stillness appears, not as the absence of sound, but as a quiet form of acceptance, a place where we stop the endless conversations we keep having with ourselves. Schopenhauer believed that only when we give up the need to control everything and force every question to have an answer can the mind reclaim the peace that knowledge often takes away. And strangely, the deeper we walk into awareness, the more we recognize the value of an empty space that carries no meaning at all. There are early mornings when the cold still clings to the window frame, and the intelligent wake with the feeling that everything is too much and too little at the same time. They observe the small movements of life the way they watch a stream flow by, no longer feeling the urge to step into the water to change its course. Thoughts that were once loud now fade into soft glimmers, and stillness rises to the center like an unexpected guest who somehow feels familiar. In that moment, they do not try to answer anything, nor force themselves to understand more. They simply breathe, and breathe without being interrupted by the need to search for meaning. What is strange is that this stillness does not come from effort. You cannot chase peace the way you chase a goal. The more you run after it, the farther it goes. It comes only when you acknowledge that some things cannot be understood. Some questions do not need answers, and some parts of life must be allowed to unfold in their own natural flow. In that letting go, a letting go not born of exhaustion but of having seen enough, the mind becomes lighter in a way that surprises even itself. After spending so long inside the maze of analysis, the intelligent often feel this stillness as a gift. Not a gift given from outside, but one they discover after setting aside all the walls they built to protect themselves from hurt. In that moment, they understand that running away from pain is what sharpens pain, and that sometimes what they need is not a solution, but the softness to stand still before the flowing river of life. The stillness Schopenhauer spoke of is not indifference. It is a state where a person is no longer torn between desire and fear, disappointment and hope. It is like standing before a calm lake and realizing that what makes its surface beautiful is not the ripples, but its ability to reflect the sky perfectly. The mind works the same way. Only when it stops shaking can it reflect what it holds without distortion or exaggeration. In that stillness, the simplest things become valuable. A warm cup of tea, an open page of a book, the soft sound of morning birds, the warmth of a passing touch. These moments no longer need explanation or interpretation. They only need to be lived fully. The intelligent often discover that it is these simple things that draw them back toward life, toward the most human part within them, the part that does not demand as much as the mind usually does. Stillness also slows down the movements inside. When the mind is exhausted from thinking, it often runs at a pace the body cannot follow. But within this quiet, thoughts begin to slow, emotions settle, and sensitivity softens from a sharp blade into gentle water that protects instead of cutting. In that moment, the intelligent feel the distance between themselves and their own fear beginning to widen. Yet the most important gift stillness brings is the ability to see personal limits without treating them as failure. When the mind stops chasing answers, it begins to see the beauty of imperfection, like standing before an old broken statue and realizing that the crack reveals its history. People are the same, the things they have not achieved, the fears they have not conquered, the parts of themselves still unfinished. All of it is part of their structure. And from this recognition, a deeper peace emerges. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of understanding. The peace of knowing you do not need to control everything. You do not need to predict every possibility. You do not need to outrun life just to avoid the pain that may come. Sometimes standing still is the only way to feel what life is trying to give you. When the intelligent learn to stand still like this, they begin to see that pain is no longer as sharp as before, and joy no longer as fragile. Everything becomes steadier, like the heartbeat returning to its natural rhythm. Intelligence does not disappear. It simply moves to a new place, no longer dominating, but supporting. It becomes a tool that helps us see more clearly without forcing us to hurt more deeply. In this stillness, they also begin to see the subtle difference between understanding and acceptance. Understanding is the action of the mind. Acceptance is the nod of the soul. These two do not always arrive together. The intelligent may understand many things but rarely accept them. When stillness arrives, these two movements meet, opening the door for a person to stop fighting the very nature of life. And at this threshold, a new question begins to form. If the mind can become gentle when we learn to be still, what made it so heavy in the first place? The answer does not lie in art or in stillness, but in the deepest place where the self hides. Entering that place, the journey begins to touch the long shadow behind every inner struggle, the self, the one that always demands, always fights, always wants more than life can offer. From the stillness, where the mind stops chasing the crashing waves of thought, the story leads us one step deeper into the innermost region of awareness, where the self resides like a patient shadow. It is not loud, it does not show itself, but it stands behind every desire, every fear, every inner struggle. This is the faintest, most intricate layer, where even the sharpest mind is often deceived. The self is not an enemy with a clear face. It is like mist settling on a mirror, making the reflection real yet always slightly distorted. When intelligent people begin to see that their exhaustion comes not only from thinking, but from the quiet demands of the self. A subtle shift begins. They understand that their sadness does not come from a chaotic world, but from the self, insisting that the world must align with its wishes. They hurt when others misunderstand them because the self wants to be seen completely. They fear failure because the self needs affirmation. They feel sorrow when joy fades quickly because the self wants to hold on to what it finds beautiful. And in these movements, the mind is pulled into the battlefield of desire, becoming a tool that protects the self instead of illuminating life. Seeing this, they often experience a moment as if standing before a fogged mirror. All the things they believed were the real reasons for their unease suddenly feel light as smoke. And through that smoke they see a deeper truth. They are not tired because they think too much, but because they keep trying to become someone better in the eyes of someone else, including themselves. I must understand. I must be strong. I must be deep. I must not be wrong. These commands, though silent, have carried them through each day like a soldier wearing heavy armor they never had time to remove. Yet at this point, a new ability appears. The ability to let go of the self not by fighting it, but by seeing through it. Like standing in a familiar room and suddenly noticing how the light has changed. Everything is still there, yet everything feels different. The self works the same way. It does not disappear, but it shrinks. Exactly as Schopenhauer hinted, when it is no longer fed by desire, it grows quiet, like a small ember that has run out of fuel. When the self fades, the mind changes too. It no longer tries to explain, argue, or assert its worth through insight. In this state, the mind is no longer a sharp blade of analysis but becomes a gentle stream. It knows that understanding is not always required, and sometimes peace comes from accepting an empty space instead of trying to fill it. Once the intelligent experience this moment, they often find that their loneliness no longer cuts. It becomes a privacy, a soft kind of separation without threat. Here they begin to notice something subtle. The self loves insecurity, because insecurity gives it reason to exist. It wants them to worry about the future, because the future is where it can manipulate. It wants them to revisit the past, because the past is where it can retell the story in its favor. But when they stand in stillness, without future or past, with only the pure present, the self becomes useless. It cannot function in full presence, and for the first time in a long while, the intelligent feel a lightness like mist dissolving. In this state, everything once complicated becomes simple in a way that needs no explanation. One breath in is enough to see that life is no longer a chain of tasks to solve. One breath out is enough to release the tension they have carried for too long. Not because they abandon life, but because they stop carrying it as a burden. They begin to walk as if each step needs no destination, walking just to walk, living just to live. And when they are no longer driven by the demands of the self, compassion begins to widen. Intelligent people are often seen as cold, but that coldness usually comes from the exhaustion of running a mind that feels everything too strongly. When the mind carries less weight, they see others with new eyes, the eyes of someone who understands that everyone is carrying a private battle. They no longer treat every word as judgment, every distance as rejection, every disappointment as proof of inadequacy. Instead, they see the shared fragility, the shared softness, and from this arises a sense of connection the mind had once pushed away. In this ease, they discover a lesson so simple it feels almost obvious. The less they try to become someone, the closer they come to themselves. When the self no longer forces them to be the best, the deepest, the strongest, they begin to live like someone listening to life instead of analyzing it. And in that listening, they feel the beauty that the mind once obscured, the beauty of what is unfinished, the beauty of loss, the beauty of letting go. From here, the journey crosses into another threshold. When the self is set down and the mind no longer holds the reins, a new kind of freedom appears, a freedom not from the world, but from within. And this freedom leads us to the final question, the question of how the mind can become a path toward wisdom instead of a source of endless fatigue. Entering the next part, the story turns toward the final light of this journey, the realization that the weight of intelligence can become a gift when we learn to place it where it truly belongs. When the self quiets and the mind no longer panics under the weight of constant demands, Another kind of light appears, soft as early morning mist yet steady as the first winter sun. It does not illuminate the entire path, it does not promise a life without pain, but it allows a person to walk with a calmer rhythm, a fuller breath. In this state, intelligence is no longer a blade cutting through awareness, but a clear mirror that helps us see ourselves, without judgment, without expectation, simply through the gentle presence of being. In that presence, the intelligent finally realize that what they have been searching for is not an answer, but the peace that comes from knowing they do not have to answer everything. The questions that once kept them awake now feel light as leaves drifting through an afternoon breeze. They are still there, but they no longer weigh the heart down. They understand that deep awareness does not have to walk hand in hand with suffering. Suffering appears only when the mind is pulled into the realm of desire, where the self demands and fears loss. But when those demands step aside, the mind becomes a gentle companion, observing the world without forcing them to strain to understand or to fix it. From here, a delicate balance forms, like the surface of a lake after a strong wind. You may still see a few small ripples, but the depth has returned to its natural calm. After moving through layers of analysis, doubt, solitude, and letting go, the intelligent begin to understand that true intelligence is not knowing more but knowing when to stop. They stop chasing perfection, stop wanting the world to match their ideals, stop insisting they must always be strong or profound. And in that stopping, the mind finds a new posture for living, one that is not swept by conflict yet not drowned in emptiness. One afternoon, as sunlight slants through the window and settles on the table like a ribbon of gold, they sit still and realize they are no longer waiting for something to be happy. They no longer need the world to be clear, the past to be light, or the future to be certain. They feel the fullness of the present, a fullness that does not depend on achievement or the approval of others. It is a fullness like a steady heartbeat, quiet and unshowy, yet the foundation of all life. In that moment, they also open more easily to others. Understanding becomes connection instead of judgment. When they see someone stumble, they no longer wonder why that person did not foresee it. They simply see a human being hurting in a way that is universal. When someone lashes out, they no longer feel compelled to analyze the cause. They simply see a heart overwhelmed. Intelligence, when not claimed by the self, becomes a doorway to compassion. Not pity, but the ability to see the weight someone else carries without making it heavier. This creates a soft, resting place in the mind, a spaciousness they never had before. From this new place, they see that intelligence was never meant to isolate them. It becomes harmful only when placed in the wrong part of the heart. When placed in deep listening, intelligence reveals essence instead of appearance. When placed in silence, it produces clarity instead of chaos. And when placed in kindness, it makes a person more connected, not more distant. In this recognition, a question that followed them for years dissolves. Is intelligence a gift or a burden? The answer does not lie in intelligence itself, but in the way they carry it. When they carry it as a weapon, the world becomes a battlefield. When they carry it as a mirror, the world becomes a reflection that helps them learn about themselves. And when they carry it as the soft part of the heart, the world becomes a place where they can walk lightly. Not to avoid suffering, but to understand that suffering is only a passing part of the journey. At this point, they look back on the path they have taken, the long nights of relentless thought, the moments when awareness was so sharp their heart felt weighted with stone, the times they felt lost in a crowd without knowing why. And they see that all of it led them to something far more precious than knowledge. Wisdom. Wisdom is not the peak of intelligence. It is the reconciliation between the mind and the heart. It is when we no longer choose between clarity and peace, between insight and gentleness. It is when both can exist together, like sunlight and shade creating a perfect afternoon. And in the final quiet moment of this journey, a soft thought rises, not to conclude but to open. The direction intelligence takes from here depends on where we place it. If we place it on our shoulders, it becomes a burden. If we place it in our head, it becomes a tool. But if we place it in our heart, it becomes a light bright enough to guide us without blinding us. The story does not end here. It opens into another journey, where intelligence is no longer a subtle curse but a key, helping us live deeper, lighter, and truer. Because in the end, like a quiet but persistent current, what everyone is searching for is not to know more, but to see themselves clearly amid all the changes of life, to see and to smile, as if clarity has finally found a place to rest.
Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.